shadow frequency, where the veil between this world and the next grows thin. The things that whisper in the dark are given voice. From the cryptic candlelit studios, deep in the Indiana forests, your host, Matt Wilson, and his spectral producer, Juniper Ravenwood, unearth the forbidden, the forgotten, and the fearsome. So, still your heart, dim the light, and listen closely. For once you tune into the shadow frequency, you may never tune out.
Welcome back to the Shadow Frequency. I'm Juniper, and tonight we're heading toward a quiet island surrounded by cold Atlantic water, where one ordinary Sunday morning was shattered by something enormous, violent, and almost impossible to explain. You know, there are certain places that seem calm on the surface but carry a strange energy underneath. Old mining communities have that feeling sometimes, empty tunnels, rusting equipment, stories buried under stories, and on Bell Island, the ground itself may be part of the mystery. Tonight's episode is called The Bell Island Boom, the day Newfoundland exploded. On April 2nd, 1978, residents of Bell Island, Newfoundland, heard a tremendous blast powerful enough to shake homes and carry across Conception Bay. At the apparent center of the event, electrical systems reacted violently, appliances failed, animals were killed, and unusual holes appeared in the ground. Then there were the lights. A 12-year-old boy riding his bicycle reported that the island became unnaturally quiet immediately before the explosion. After the blast, he saw two glowing spheres swirling close to the ground before they disappeared. Was it an extraordinary atmospheric event? Ball lightning? A lightning superbolt? Some strange interaction involving the island's iron-rich geology? Or did something much more secretive reach Bell Island during the uneasy years of the Cold War? Chris, what is your first reaction to this one?
Is the silence before the blast that gets me, June. Birds stopping, dogs going quiet. Then the explosion and those glowing spheres. Even before we get into the theories, it sounds like the opening scene of a paranormal thriller. Except this happened to real people on a real Sunday morning.
Exactly, that little pause before the boom almost feels like the island knew something was coming. Matt, what are you thinking as you open this file?
I'm thinking this is one of those cases where the physical evidence makes it difficult to wave the story away. Something happened on Bell Island. Houses shook, electrical systems were damaged, animals died, and once scientists connected to Los Alamos arrived, the case moved into a much stranger neighborhood.
A very strange neighborhood indeed. And with that, Matt, let's step onto Bell Island and open tonight's file.
You are tuned to the shadow frequency, where every whisper tells a story from beyond the veil. Hosted by Matt Wilson, produced by Juniper Ravenwood, with Chris Beach. The darkness continues.
Thanks, Juniper, and this one really does feel like a file that should smell faintly of salt water and scorched wiring when you open it. Bell Island sits in Conception Bay, off the coast of Newfoundland, shaped by the cold Atlantic and the iron ore beneath its surface. By 1978, its great mining years were behind it, but the island still carried that history in its cliffs and old workings. Sunday, April 2nd, began quietly. It was cold. There was a light, freezing drizzle. The bay was calm. People were preparing for church or Sunday dinner. Nothing about the morning announced catastrophe. There was no rising thunderstorm marching across the water, no aircraft spiraling downward, no warning siren. Then, at around 11 o'clock, the island was struck by a sound so violent that ordinary life seemed split apart in a single instant. Homes shook. People rushed outside. Across Conception Bay, others heard it too. For a few seconds, nobody knew whether Bell Island had suffered an industrial disaster, an earthquake, a mine collapse, or something descending from the sky, and the answer seemed to be hiding somewhere just beyond the smoke. The attention quickly narrowed toward Bickfordville, immediately west of Lance Cove, and especially toward the property of Jim Bickford. This was where the story stopped sounding like a distant boom and became something far stranger. Inside the Bickford home, the electrical system seemed to erupt. Glass fuses reportedly shot from the fuse box like bullets, traveling the length of a hallway and burying themselves in a wall. A streak of blue flame followed. Jim Bickford described blue fire coming across the kitchen table while the house filled with the smell of burned material. Outside, a shed attached to the barn had been knocked from its foundation. The chicken coop was demolished, and the chickens inside were killed. Nearby homes reported their own electrical disturbances, televisions failing, motors burning out, wiring scorched, appliances ruined. This was not simply a noise passing overhead. Whatever happened had reached into walls, traveled through wires, and left physical damage behind, as though an invisible hand had found every electrical pathway on the island and pulled tight. Now, I have an item from the file here. It's a printed copy of the local Bell Island history page maintained by Historic Wabana, and the wording is wonderfully plain, which somehow makes it more unsettling. It records a loud explosion in Bickfordville, damage to houses and electrical wiring, television sets exploding in nearby Lance Cove, and 2 cup-shaped holes in the ground roughly 2 feet deep and 3 feet wide. Later accounts describe 3 large holes, so even the landscape seems to shift slightly depending on which witness account you follow. But the central image remains the same: shallow, strange depressions torn into the ground near apparent center of the event, with no conventional crater and no obvious wreckage. No fallen aircraft, no bomb casing, no machinery scattered across the field, just those holes, the dead animals, and a house whose fuses had become projectiles. That is when this story takes on its peculiar weight, because something powerful had clearly arrived, but nothing obvious remained behind to claim responsibility. And then there is Darin Bickford. He was 12 years old, outside riding his bicycle, heading home because a favorite television program was coming on at 11. It is such a normal detail that it almost hurts. A kid on a bike, thinking about a television show, moving through an ordinary Sunday morning. But as Darin approached the end of the driveway, he noticed the world around him change. The birds stopped chirping. The dogs stopped barking. The island seemed to hold its breath. That silence did not last long. Darin described the blast as being like a shotgun going off, except vast enough to shake the ground beneath him. And after the sound came light. He reported seeing one luminous sphere, then another, hovering close to the ground. Blue made up much of the center, with orange and yellow moving around the edges. The colors seemed to mix and swirl. He was frightened, but he could not look away. Then after only a few seconds, the glowing spheres vanished as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving a 12-year-old boy staring at an empty patch of air that had just been occupied by something impossible. Darin was not the only person who associated the boom with strange light. One woman reported seeing a ball of fire. Another witness looking across Conception Bay described a beam of light rising toward the sky from the direction of Bell Island. Several residents later spoke of a ringing tone before the blast. Imagine the sequence from the point of view of someone standing there. First a tone at the edge of hearing, then the abrupt silence of animals, then a concussion strong enough to shake homes, then blue flame crawling through a kitchen and luminous spheres spinning close to the ground. The pieces refuse to form one clean picture. They overlap like exposures on an old roll of film. And perhaps that is why the Bell Island boom has survived the imagination for so long. The witnesses were not describing a distant heavenly mystery. They were describing something that came down among the houses, passed through the electrical lines, and left the entire island wondering whether it had been struck from above or awakened from below. The first officials and investigators faced a scene that resisted easy language. There had been a tremendous blast, but not the kind of central devastation one expects from a bomb. There were damaged electrical systems, dead animals, strange ground marks, and stories of fireballs. The boom had carried across the bay and beyond, but the apparent center of the damage was intimate. A farmhouse hallway, a kitchen table, a child on a bicycle. That contrast is what stays with me. Something enormous announced itself across Newfoundland, yet its most chilling fingerprints were left in the smallest places. and as news spread, another layer began to settle over the island. This was 1978, deep in the Cold War, when invisible signals and classified experiments did not belong only to science fiction. Soon, scientists connected to Los Alamos would arrive from the United States, drawn to an iron-rich island and a blast that seemed to have lit up more than the sky. And Bell Island was about to discover that the silence after an explosion can be even louder than the explosion itself. Whatever struck Bell Island did not leave behind a smoking machine or a neat crater. It left scorched wiring, strange lights, dead animals, and questions that seemed to grow larger every time somebody tried to answer them.
The part that stays with me is Darin on that bicycle. One second, he's thinking about getting home to watch TV. The next second, the entire natural world falls silent around him.
And then those colours appear in the air. Blue in the centre, orange and yellow around the edges. It is hard to picture that without wondering what you would do if it happened a few yards away from you.
Oh, no kidding, Chris. In the second half, we are going deeper into the Los Alamos connection. The theory involving Soviet radio transmissions, the iron beneath Bell Island, and the most credible scientific explanation, an extremely rare lightning superbolt. But the natural explanation may be almost as strange as the paranormal possibilities. Juniper and Chris, I'll send it over to you guys for the break.
Bell Island did not simply hear an explosion. For a few terrifying seconds, the island seemed to become the center of an invisible force no one could fully explain.
Thanks, Matt. So far, we have a calm island morning, a blast heard across the bay, fuses becoming projectiles, blue flames moving through a kitchen, and glowing spheres hovering close to the ground. And I have a feeling some of you listening right now are already wondering whether you would have gone outside to investigate or quietly backed away from the windows and hoped the lights stayed on. Chris, before we open the next section of the file, it's over to you.
Cheers, June. This one has a very uncomfortable energy to it, because it is not just a mysterious noise in the distance. It reached into homes. It moved through wires. That is the bit I do not like. Wherever you are listening, give the show a like and subscribe. It genuinely helps the algorithms find us. You can catch the Shadow Frequency on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Rumble, and all the major podcast directories. Everything is also at shadowfrequencypodcast.com, every episode. The companion blog, merch, show notes, platform links and the ents, and the option to buy us a coffee. You can also send an email or voice message through the website, and we may play it on a future episode. June, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Chris. It's time to fire up that spectrocosmic message materializer, easing the voltage upward, turning the brass dial past unexplained whispers, and giving the static chamber one gentle tap.
Message retrieved from the void.
There we are. Something just rattled through the receiving tube. It looks like a message wrapped in a thin layer of midnight fog. We'll carefully unfold it here and see who found our frequency this week. This one comes from Jacob in Indiana, and Jacob writes, "Hi, Shadow Frequency crew. I usually listen on Spotify during overnight security shifts at a warehouse complex here in Indiana. Most nights are quiet, which is exactly how I like them, but your episodes definitely make the long hallways and dark loading docks feel a little more interesting. The best time to listen is usually around 3 in the morning when I am doing the outer perimeter walk. There is one stretch behind the building where the security lights not quite reach the fence line, and that is usually when your UFO and haunting episodes hit a little differently. Keep the strange cases coming. They make the night shift go faster, although I may need to stop listening to the creepy ones before checking the empty stairwells. Stay alert in the attic. Jacob from Indiana." Jacob, thanks for listening. An empty warehouse complex at 3 in the morning sounds like a location where the spectrocosmic message materializer might feel a little too comfortable. And I think we have all had that moment where a harmless shadow looks completely different after listening to a paranormal story. You can send your own listener mail to shadowpodcast@protonmail.com. Tell us where you listen, what strange topics you enjoy, or send us a case you think belongs in the file. Chris, I'm going to turn it back over to you for this week's Shadow News.
Cheers, June. Jacob, I know exactly what you mean about those empty stairwells. The mind can turn a perfectly ordinary building into a haunted labyrinth very quickly when you are alone in the early hours. A fascinating discovery at Germany's Nanstein Castle is giving archaeologists a possible glimpse into the world of medieval alchemy. During construction-related investigations, researchers uncovered a rare ceramic distillation vessel dating to the 15th or 16th century, a find that suggests alchemical or early chemical work may once have been carried out inside the castle walls. Experts say the flask was glazed green on the outside and yellow on the inside, but no residue survived, so exactly what was being distilled remains a mystery. June, I'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Chris. That is one of those discoveries where the missing residue makes the object even more intriguing. You know something was being heated, distilled, and carefully collected inside those castle walls, but the final ingredient has vanished into history. And that feels strangely appropriate tonight because Bell Island has left us with damage, witness accounts, old newspaper clippings, and one enormous question. We can see the traces of the event, but the force that created them remains just out of reach. Matt, the second half of the file is yours.
The birds went silent, the dogs stopped barking, and then Newfoundland erupted with a blast heard across the bay. Whatever struck Bell Island left behind scorched wiring, strange lights, and a mystery that still hums beneath the surface.
Thanks, Juniper. And Jacob, doing security rounds at night is already a pretty good setting for this show, but tonight's case might make every flickering light feel a little more personal. I did security for a brief time here in Indiana myself, and I had to walk through a particular basement hallway in the middle of the night, and I happened to look over one time into this room, and there was an ironing board in this room for one reason or another in the corner, and it was standing up and scared me to death. I thought that's it. Something's going to eat me. And then I realized it was just an ironing board. And Chris, that alchemy story fits too. There's something unnerving about finding an old vessel and knowing a process took place inside it, while the crucial residue has vanished. Bell Island has the same problem on a much larger scale. Something happened, the evidence remained, the cause slipped away. After the blast, the arrival of two scientists from the Los Alamos Scientific Laboratory added an entirely new current to the story. Their names were John Warren and Robert Fryman. Los Alamos was not an ordinary name in 1978. It carried the history of nuclear weapons research and the atmosphere of classified work. To residents already staring at blasted wiring, dead chickens, and holes in the ground, the appearance of American scientists from New Mexico naturally felt like another clue. Why would men associated with one of the most famous laboratories in the world take an interest in a battered farmhouse on a small Newfoundland island unless they recognized something in the pattern? Now here's the second item I'm pulling from the file. It's a reproduction of a front page headline from the Western Star dated June 15, 1978. Bell Island boom was Soviet radio wave. Just reading that headline places us directly inside the unease of the era. The theory was promoted by Andrew McCrowski, director of the Planetary Association for Clean Energy in Ottawa. He proposed that an extremely low-frequency radio wave had interacted with an iron ore body beneath Bell Island. In the more elaborate version of the idea, Soviet transmissions, possibly involving a station in Gomel and another in Havana, had crossed paths with the island's geology and triggered an electrical breakdown. It is the sort of theory that sounds almost too cinematic until you remember the period. Nuclear brinkmanship, experimental communications, radar signals, secret programs, and the constant fear that invisible technology could reach across borders without anyone seeing it arrive. Bell Island's ore deposits gave the theory a natural stage. The old mines extended under the island and beneath the surrounding water. Generations had lived above that iron-rich ground. For anyone trying to understand the blast, it was tempting to imagine the island itself as a receiver that had suddenly answered an unseen transmission. Now, here is the skeptical angle, and it deserves a fair hearing because it does not make the case boring. Warren and Fryman were not necessarily shadowy agents chasing a secret weapon. They have been tracking unusually intense lightning events, sometimes called superbolts, using data associated with the Vela satellite system. Vela had been developed to help detect nuclear detonations, but its optical sensors also revealed extraordinary bright lightning flashes. A 1977 scientific paper described strokes more than 100 times brighter than typical lightning. The Los Alamos interpretation was that Bell Island had experienced a rare overland superbolt. That idea can account for a great deal: the enormous report, the electrical surges, the blown fuses, the damaged appliances, the blue flame, and perhaps even the unusual marks in the ground. It also offers a path toward Darin's luminous spheres, because ball lightning has long been used as a possible label for glowing short-lived formations associated with electrical events. But notice what that explanation asks us to accept. The weather did not resemble a typical electrical storm. No thunderstorms were reported elsewhere in the province that day. The bolt would have been extraordinarily rare, striking land when such events are more commonly associated with water, and leaving behind effects dramatic enough to resemble an attack. The natural explanation may be the strongest explanation, but nature is not always reassuring when it behaves like an intelligence. Bell Island had another strange entry in its history long before 1978. A daily news report from November 1896 described an extraordinary flash of lightning over Belle Isle that lasted for 5 seconds and was called the most powerful ever experienced there. The old article attributed its attraction to the immense bed of iron ore beneath the island. The historic Wabana archive adds an important correction: hematite. The iron ore associated with Wabana is non-magnetic. That does not erase the older story, but it stops us from turning geology into magic too quickly. The island's underground history still matters, though. Bell Island had been known for iron deposits for centuries, and large-scale mining transformed the place from the late 19th century onward. Shafts and working reached outward beneath the sea. The island had already been shaped by forces hidden underfoot, long before a blast arrived from somewhere overhead. So when people wondered whether the geology amplified an atmospheric event or whether multiple phenomena occurred at once, they were not merely inventing a spooky landscape. They were looking at a real landscape that had always carried an unusual relationship with the ground below. And this is where the Bell Island boom refuses to close neatly. A superbolt may explain the broad outline, ball lightning may give a name to the hovering spheres, Cold War fears may explain why a Soviet radio wave theory gained attention, but names are not the same as answers. Darin Bickford's question remains the most haunting one. If the light was lightning, how did it remain stationary and motionless in the air? How did it appear from nowhere and then vanish? Perhaps there is a perfectly natural chain of electrical events connecting the freezing drizzle, the atmosphere, the bay, the island's geology, and the wiring inside the Bickford home. Perhaps Bell Island was simply the wrong place beneath the wrong sky at exactly the wrong second. Yet the blast did not pass harmlessly in the clouds. It came down into a kitchen, a hallway, a chicken coop, and the memory of a child on a bicycle. And nearly half a century later, we can describe the likely mechanism, but the scene still feels like a warning. For 4 or 5 seconds on an ordinary Sunday morning, something invisible found Bell Island, and the island answered back. Bell Island boom may have been nature behaving in a way that people rarely witness, but even that answer leaves us standing in the same place: a quiet island, a stunned family, and 2 luminous spheres hovering close to the ground where nothing should have been.
I think the Superbolt explanation is strong, but it does not take the atmosphere away from the case. If anything, the possibility that the sky can produce something that violent without warning is its own kind of nightmare.
And I still keep coming back to the silence. The birds stopped, the dogs stopped. For one brief moment, Bell Island seemed to be listening for something.
Exactly, June. Maybe the island was struck by an extraordinary lightning event. Maybe its geology helped shape what happened. Maybe the Cold War theories were simply fears looking for a signal. Or maybe the file still contains a frequency we have not learned how to hear. Juniper, I'll turn it over to you.
The official answer may have been lightning, but the Bell Island boom never settled comfortably into any ordinary explanation. Somewhere between a Superbolt, Cold War paranoia, and something far stranger, the truth remains buried beneath the island's iron-rich ground.
Tonight, we open the file on the Bell Island boom, the day Newfoundland exploded. On April 2nd, 1978, something powerful shattered an ordinary Sunday morning on Bell Island. The blast shook homes, damaged electrical systems, killed animals, left unusual holes in the ground, and placed a 12-year-old witness in front of two swirling spheres of blue, orange, and yellow light. The strongest conventional explanation remains an extraordinarily rare lightning superbolt, possibly accompanied by ball lightning, but the lack of an ordinary storm, the island's unusual history, and the arrival of scientists connected to Los Alamos, and the eerie witness accounts have allowed this case to keep humming in the dark for nearly half a century. Thank you for joining us for another journey into the unexplained. We will be back soon with another strange case. You guys want to say goodnight?
Good night, everybody. Keep your eyes on the sky and maybe keep a flashlight nearby when the lights begin to flicker. You never know what kind of signal might be moving through the wires.
Good night from me as well. Stay curious, stay grounded, and if the birds suddenly stop singing, perhaps give the sky a quick glance before heading indoors.
Good night, everyone. Until we meet again, keep the signal steady, the shadows close, and your radio tuned just slightly beyond the edge of the ordinary.
This episode was conjured with a solemn vow to explore the unexplained while remaining bound to the truths that have been unearthed. All interpretations are speculative and offered only for your enlightenment and your entertainment.